Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Chiwendo, and in case you haven't seen my face on this channel, I am the lead creative director of Eco Designs to Fit. And in case you have been hearing my voice in this channel but haven't seen my face, yes, this is the voice behind the camera as always. So I'm coming right here in front of you today because you can tell I'm actually at home, right? And I always have you guys in mind, so I thought of what to do since I'm bored. And then I went through my channel, the comments and all those good stuff, and I figured out that so many of us, we don't even understand what a basic bodice pattern is. You will attest that if you don't know how to draft a proper basic bodice pattern, nothing I say in this channel is going to make sense to you. So if you're a beginner, intermediate, or you use freehand method and don't know how to draft your basic bodice pattern, this tutorial is for you. Okay, but if you actually know how to draft a basic bodice pattern, you can also watch, because you might see or figure out things that you haven't been doing right. So for this very tutorial, I'm going to be making it as quick as, and it's going to be one of the most simplest tutorial you ever come across on basic bodice pattern. So if you are interested in this, please grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and let's just dive right into this tutorial. Here are the measurements you are going to be needing for this tutorial. We have the shoulder, the bust line, the waistline, and the hip line. And here are the basic tools which are going to be needing. We have the measuring tape, the ruler, the marker, and then the curved ruler, which is also a French curve. Okay, here we have this is our pattern paper which we are going to be using to draft out this pattern, and then we are going to be marking out our vertical measurements. Now the vertical measurements are the shoulder line, the bust line, the waistline, and the hip line. Okay, now I've marked out my shoulder line, and from there I'm going to extend my tape towards the vertical line and then mark out the bust point, which is 11 inches, the waistline, which is 17 inches, and then the hip line, which is 25 inches. And I went ahead to use my ruler to make that into a squared line. Okay, now from the center front, you are going to have to, on the shoulder line, measure your shoulder divided by 2, and then from this shoulder divided by 2, you are going to go down by 1 inch, which is going to be your shoulder slope, because our shoulder is not straight. And then from there, you are going to have to input your chest measurement, which is the calculation I just put on the screen right now. Okay, so here is how to calculate that. Your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5, you mark that and then connect it into the shoulder slope. Now once you are done with that, go ahead and then label all your lines, because you don't want to get confused by the time you start drafting out the bodice measurements. Okay, now from here we are going to have to, from the center front again, measure out our neck width and the neck depth, and we are going to have to use this standard of 3 by 3 inches. Okay, which is 3 inches for the width and 3 inches for the depth. And then use your curved ruler to connect your neckline, and then use your ruler, the straight ruler, to connect into the slope. Okay, now you have to divide what you have in between your shoulder slope and the chest line by 2, and once you get that, go ahead and mark it out, and from that line again go in by half an inch or 3/4 of an inch, whichever you want. And then from the chest line, you're going to have to divide your bust circumference by 4, mark it out. Do that for the bust line also, and then to the waistline divide your waist by 4, mark that out, and go down to the hip line, divide your hip circumference by 4, and then mark that out. Now you're going to have to use your straight ruler and connect these lines together, okay? And then you're going to have to connect your front armhole, okay? Now you are going to have to use your curve ruler to make sure that you don't have any sort of sharp curve on all these lines that you created, because our shape is not straight, okay? Our shape is very curvy. That's why you need to curve it out properly well, and from there you go ahead and connect your front armhole, which is what I just did. From here, the next step you should take is to divide your bust span measurement by 2. So my bust span measurement is 8 inches. I divided by 2 and I have 4 plus half an inch for seam allowance, and mark that from the center front on the bust points. Mark it out on the waistline also and on the hip line, and then use your ruler to connect it down to the hip line, okay? Now for our dart intake, we are going to be removing a dart of 0.75 inches. You can make use of 1, okay, but for me I made use of 1.5 inches. Now our front dart usually starts from 1 inch below the bust point and then ends 2 inches above the hip line, okay? I'm going to go ahead and mark that out and then connect all my darts. So you guys, can you see? So this is basically what I'm trying to mark out right now. Can you see how I came up by 2 inches from the hip line, and from the bust point I went down by 1 inch, and that should be for your front dart intake, okay? So you guys, this 1.5 inches that we removed, we are going to have to replace it on the waistline. So if you took out 1 inch, which is half an inch on both sides, you are going to have to replace 1 inch and then connect these lines together, okay? So you guys, at this point we are basically done with the front pattern, and we are going to have to cut it out, okay? So at this point we are not going to insert any form of seam allowance, but because this is just a block, so with this block you can make any kind of outfit and then add up your sewing allowance. So I'm going to go ahead and label this the front pattern, and we are going to bring in another fresh pattern paper and then we draft our back block, okay? Now for the back block is going to be replica of what you have on your front pattern. The only difference here is the zip allowance and then the darts, okay? So as time goes on you are going to know why the dart is different, but for now we are going to mark out every other thing the same, including our zipper allowance. Now from the center back you are going to go in by 2 inches all the way to the length, which is the hip line, and then you make this into a straight line, okay? So once you are done with this, you are going to have to label it your zip allowance. Guys, don't forget to label all your lines or whichever it is that you just did, because this can be very confusing. And now you are going to have to bring in your front pattern, okay? So make sure that the front pattern is touching the vertical line for the shoulder, okay? So just make sure that it's touching it, and you're going to have to use your solo tape or any object that is close by to hold this down, because you don't want it shaking by the time you start drafting out your back pattern, okay? I'm going to go ahead and rule out all my important lines. which is the bust point, the waistline, and then the hip line, just for me not to make any mistake. And from the neckline, we are going to determine our back neck depth and the neck width. So for my back neck depth, I'm going to make use of 1 inch. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is to go ahead and use my curve ruler and then connect this into the zipper allowance, and then go ahead and make sure that my front pattern is aligning with the lines. Okay, also again, I'll go ahead and use my marker to trace down using dotted line all the shape that I have on that front pattern. So once I'm done tracing out all the shape, I'm going to go ahead and remove the front pattern and we start modifying the back pattern. Okay, like I told you before, the front and the back is the same thing, just that we have a zipper allowance here and then the dart is kind of a little different. So I'm going to go ahead again and input my bust span measurement, which is 4.5 inches, and then make that into a straight line all the way from the bust point down to the waistline. Now I'm going to go ahead and rule out my chest line properly well, and that goes to why that of the back is different from that of the front. Now the dart of the back usually starts from 1 inch below the chest line and then also end 2 inches above the hip line. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and mark this out, but before that, let's also take in our dart on the waistline, which is 1.5 inches. So I'm going to share it equally on both sides, just like I did at the front pattern. Okay, so I went ahead to take in 3/4 of an inch on both sides of the waist and then connected it down to the 2 inches above the hip line and then 1 inch below the chest line. So now that we are done with this, you're going to go ahead and use your marker and make all your lines visible enough for you to see them. And once you are done with the sides shapes, you're going to go ahead and bring in your French curve and then also make the armhole of the back visible. Okay, and once you are done with that, you're going to go ahead and cut out your pattern. Go ahead and bring in your front pattern and then cut out the front armhole. So now it's time for us to modify our zipper allowance. Okay, if you don't do this, you're going to have to go through the stress of having bulge around your zipper area. So once you don't want this, what you're going to do is to go in from the waistline by 1 inch and then connect this down to the hip line and then back to your neck depth. And then go ahead and cut off the excess allowance. Now you guys, that is it for this tutorial. I'm going to go ahead and label this the back and you can see the front as well. We are done with this tutorial and that will bring us to the end of this video. You guys, if you find this video helpful, please do make sure to give it a thumbs up, share to get more people to see this video, and I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you do, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't done yet, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.